Struggle to add colour to stamped images in a clean and simple way? In this video I show you how. Hello there and welcome to Terrific Tags with me, Michelle Short. In this series I will show you how tags lend themselves to lots of different products and techniques, creating focal points on a smaller scale. Today I'm sharing how to add simple colouring with stencils. So let's get started. This is the tag die set that I'm going to be using for the majority of my series, and this is the Terrific Tags dies. I love it because you've got lots of different sizes and two different shapes. I particularly love that kind of fishtail banner one at the bottom. I really love that shape and I'm going to use that today, and I'm going to use the largest size. I have cut it from some classic crest white cardstock, and then I want to add some texture onto the tag. So I'm going to use the Deck Planks 3D embossing folder, and I'm going to position the tag into the folder, trying to make sure that it's as straight as possible, and then I can run that through my die cutting machine. You definitely could emboss onto a plain piece of cardstock and then cut it with the die afterwards if you wanted it in a particular place. That would work. These 3D embossing folders are so 3D that it doesn't really push down any of the embossing, and that's just going to give a really lovely look to the tag. It's difficult to see here on camera because it's white on white, but actually the front and the back of this embossing folder is really nice. To enhance the embossing that you're going to be able to see, I'm going to add some ink onto this, and I'm using the Glacier Caves crisp dye ink set, and I'm using the Caribbean Sky, which is one of the mid-tone shades, and I'm using the large ink blending tool here. I'm starting off very light and building up the colour. I like to do it that way just so that I can build up as much colour as I want. Next, I'm going to work on the focal point, and this is the Craft Your Life project kit, the Hello Beautiful set, and this really is a really lovely beautiful set. And what I like to do when I have sets and I'm not sure which image is going to fit onto the tag, I like to grab the die and just place it over the images here, and you can see that these two at the top would work quite nicely, and then this one here at the bottom is a little bit large. I do like to have elements hanging off the tag, but I think that one is a little bit too big. So I'm going to use the image there in the top left hand corner, and I'm going to stamp that down with some Obsidian Pigment Ink. This is definitely becoming one of my favourite, most used black inks. It's so crisp and beautiful, and it does dry really pretty quickly as well. So I'm just stamping that down onto some more classic crest white cardstock. And this is going to give a perfect impression first time. So I do let that sit to dry for a few minutes, just because it is that pigment ink. And then I can add colour in loads of different ways, but I thought it would be great to use the simple colouring stencil that comes in the kit. And this works really nicely because you've got lots of different layers that you can use to add different layers of colouring onto the images, and it's a really quick and simple way to do it. So I have the first stencil here that I need, and I'm just placing that over my image. There are some areas that could potentially get covered in ink if I'm not careful, and I am a little bit clumsy, so I'm just using some tape there just to place that over the top so that I don't accidentally get ink where I don't want it. And I'm going to use the small ink blending tools to add the colour, and I'm using the same Glacier Caves crisp dye inks here, and I'm using the Caribbean Sky to start with, just adding a very soft amount onto that, and then this is the Persian Blue, and I'm just using that to add a little bit more definition. There is two layers to the simple colouring stencils, but I'm actually just going to use the one. And what I like to do between the colours, because I've got a light and a dark, I just blend that blending tool onto a kind of rag, anything you wanted to, really, a cloth, and that just wipes away the darker colours so that I'm ready to use the lighter colour again. And I'm just going through and adding the colour onto the different areas here of my image. I do want some kind of like white areas, so I'm focusing the majority of the colour sort of towards the bottom parts or the centres of the flowers. And then I can go in again with the darker shade, and that's just going to add a little bit more depth. I know that blues aren't always a traditional colour for flowers, but I really love using them, and they're probably my go-to colour to colour in florals. What's your go-to colour for colouring in florals? Do you stick to one, or do you like to use lots of different colours? Let me know in the comments. So once I've finished off with the petals, I'm going to add some colour into the middles of the flowers, and for this I'm using the Fall Harvest Crisp dye inks. Starting off with the butternut, just adding a small amount of that. The areas are quite small, so pretty much they do get covered and don't leave too much white space, but that's absolutely fine. And then I'm going in here with the pumpkin pie, which is just a little bit darker and adds some definition. And then this is the last stencil here for the leaves, and I'm using the Greenfields Crisp dye inks for this. I really love these greens, really pretty kind of true green, I suppose. And I'm using the Frayed Leaf and the Forest Glades for this. And then here comes my favourite part, you get to reveal the finished result. And I wanted to share with you that if you didn't want to just do it with one layer, you could definitely do it with the two, and that's that flower on the right hand side. But I do like the simple colouring on the one that I did in the video. So I've used the die there to cut that out. And then I've also cut out another 2 different layers, and this is so that I can layer them up to create dimension. You could definitely use foam tape here, but sometimes I quite like to use the die cuts. So just using some tape runner there just to stick them together. And this is going to be 3 layers high, which is going to give a nice dimension. Just making sure that that's really well stuck down, and then I can move on to the sentiment. And I'm using the Best Wishes sentiment from the Sentiment Strips 2 stamp set. This is one of my favourite sets. It's got loads of different sentiments in it, perfect for lots of different occasions. And I'm going to stamp it down onto some black cardstock using Embossing Ink. So just stamping that down, I did prep the cardstock with an anti-static powder tool, and then I can use the Pure White Crisp Embossing Powder. I do like to apply that a couple of times just so that I get a really nice coverage, and then I like to heat set from the front and the back, and that just helps prevent any warping. And then once I've added the heat, I do like to kind of fan the cardstock in the air to cool it down, and I do also find that this does help with warping as well, although it does look a bit strange. And then I'm just going to use a cloth just to remove any of the excess anti-static powder, and then I can cut that down into a strip. So next I've got all of my elements here ready to go, and I'm just going to place them down onto the tag before I stick anything down so that I can move things around and see where I want them to be placed. So I'm thinking that I'm going to have my sentiment hanging off slightly from the other side, just like the elements of the flower as well, or the leaves especially. So I've added some adhesive onto the back of the flower, and then I can just press that down, making sure that I've got no adhesive on the back showing, and if I do, I can just rub that away with my finger. And then I wanted to show you that the back of this tag actually does look really quite pretty, but if I was to write a message on it, I probably would cut out another tag just from plain white cardstock and stick that on the back so that I've got a nice finished look to the back of the tag. I'm not going to do it for this one, but quite often I do. And then I can take some instant dimension foam tape to adhere the sentiment, and I like to kind of have the sentiment where it's going to be placed so that I can see where the foam tape's going to be. Just remember that it's upside down. So I can just use the Crafter's Essential micro tip tweezers there just to help me out with the placement, and then I can stick that down. I'm then going to add some twine through the top of the tag and tie it in a bow. Now this could take from anywhere between 5 minutes to half an hour, not quite, but sometimes it does feel that way. Sometimes you just can't tie bows. So I like to leave the strings quite long, the kind of tails of the bow, and just fiddle around with that for a little while. And then to finish off the tag, I'm going to use the Essential black and white enamel dots, and I'm using the white ones, and I'm just going to add a few onto the tag. I like to add elements sort of underneath a sentiment. I feel like it kind of brings the sentiment into the project. And so that's the standalone tag finished. I do like to add them onto parcels, onto gifts. Sometimes I just send them on their own, but I know that standalone tags aren't for everyone. So I thought I would share how I would add it to a card. So this is an A2 sized white card base that is top folding, and I'm going to add some ink blending onto the bottom half of this card to mimic the ink blending that's on the tag. Now I apologise in advance that my camera didn't focus quite well on this part of the video, so I've had to cut a lot of it out, but I used the large ink blending tool just to add that colour at the bottom. It's quite subtle, but it works really nicely to blend the two elements together. So the ink blending goes up as far as it does onto the tag. So to adhere this down onto the card, I'm using some instant dimension foam tape. And I can just use my tweezers there just to remove the backing, and then I can stick that down onto the middle of the card. And then so that the tag doesn't look like it's literally just floating on the top of the card, although I do think the ink blending does bring them both together, I'm just going to add a few more of those white enamel dots, and I'm going to add a couple behind the tag onto the card, and then one just on the top of the tag as well, and that looks like it's always meant to be on a card. So that's the card and tag finished for today. I love how the embossing folder adds texture and interest without distracting from the focal point. Are there any techniques you would like me to feature in my new series? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and wishing you a wonderful day.
Hello there! Did that video just spark your creativity? And do you want more project ideas and inspiration videos too? Well, if you do, please make sure that you subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, make sure that you do click that notification bell so you don't miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye!